Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name's Dr. Stephen Cosgrove. And I'm going to talk about essentially big data and market research and how they sort of flow together and how they can be used together and what's going on, I guess, in what's driving the digital economy. I mean, one thing that we have to keep in mind is that there's a lot more data now, and there's proliferation of data. There's so much data, really, people don't really know what to use it for. They're collecting for one thing, but they're really not doing too much with it at all at this particular point, but more and more people are getting more interested in that. So there's also been the hardware and the software side. We have databases now. We have embedded analytics where the analytics are already embedded in the data as it's being sent out. We have Hadoop where we can do fairly large data sets, clouds. SQL and NoSQL are two areas of database management. The NoSQL stuff is the stuff that allows you to do a lot of the qualitative kind of research that's been out there. I mean, really big data, what we're talking about here is big data and how big data is going to really change and help, obviously, the market research industry, I think. I don't like big data. You know, it sounds too much like Big Brother to me, but on the other hand, you know, and I'm not selling, you know, large data tools and things like that or systems, but on the other hand, you know, it is the big data. There's a lot of data out there, but on the other hand, with the cloud and things like that, it's going to be available to just about everybody. Also, I think it's the emphasis on the analytics side that I think is very important. And basically, you know, data activation is basically coming in, and you know, many companies are already doing this. And we'll skip to the data types, but the thing is that many companies are already doing this kind of thing, and they're starting to put the data together. They have a lot of data. If you think of any large company that's just, you know, of whether it's telecommunication or just about online, any of these kinds of things, but even the more traditional things where they have all the cash register data and things like that, there's just a lot of data out there. And the thing is that you're no longer limited because of the new databases and things like that. You're no longer limited by the kind of data that you had. In the past, I think we were limited to a large extent by structured data. We essentially used, you know, sometimes we used a data that was more qualitative and things like that, but we never were. It was never fully integrated into the thing. But now I think we are going to be able to use all different types of data, and in the cloud. You see, most of the stuff will be available in the cloud, will be available on the web so that you can actually do it. So it's essentially using the structured data, using the semi-structured data, and using the unstructured data, where we essentially are starting to build in, you know, just messages, text messages, chat, Twitter feeds, things like that. We're building those in, but we're integrating into the entire process. And then we can get into the more complex structured data where it's interlinked between different things. So the major theme here is that we're no longer limited by data. I don't think market research is limited by data as well. What it really boils down to is transactions, interactions, observations, and in this case, you can see, like, putting together the enterprise reporting data, the buying behavior, that payment history, the purchase history, which in the past has really been the domain of most of the IT departments. You put that together with the customer experience and, you know, the CRM. I prefer to call it customer experience, but the segmentation, the touches, the offers, the contacts. Then you can also put in the web and the web logs, and a lot of different things can be done along with that. And then the Internet of Things, right? You've also got all the sensors, the RFID devices, the mobile web. You know, there's a lot of stuff that can be done as well in that particular area. So essentially what we're talking about is, you know, putting together this information together to come up with a result. One of the most important things to do is the mapping, and there's a lot of new software that's available. I won't go into a lot of detail, but it's basically putting together the data, sourcing of the master data in support of the of master data management, the data migration, the conversions, and enterprise data sharing, where you may get some data from Dun & Bradstreet, for instance. You're integrating in that, having done that a million times, there's a lot of data that goes in. You're getting it from a lot of different sources. It has to be integrated. It has to be put together. But it's putting that together that will allow you to do the analytical side of things. And finally, the analytical stuff is very important in this. The data preparation, the prediction, the classification, the segmentation, the affinity analysis, all these kinds of things, building models, scoring new data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, which quite frankly is really moving very, very fast at this particular point, where you essentially start putting in data and you let the machine do a lot of learning on that. You develop artificial intelligence that is more, it's not so much driven by the structure and the physics of the actual computer, but you can actually can program in different kinds of logic into that particular thing and you use that. And the big thing is there's a platform. Essentially what we're building here is a platform for interactive analysis and insights. And we're putting it all together. So in other words, we're getting all these different sources, both the structured, the unstructured data. We're putting that together, and we're essentially using that to do analysis, and I think a lot better analysis, as I hope to show as we move along. Here are the linkages. This is the traditional market research stuff that that everybody's done: the market feasibility, brand equity, image and positioning, distribution channel testing, pricing, product development, market segmentation, usage and attitudes, customer satisfaction, value, advertising, communication, testing, just the broader kind of categories. But those are really the linkages into big data. That's market research linkages into the big data and the use of a lot of different things. One of the things, the area is the activating of the customer experience. I mean, here we have, the customer experience. It could be supplemented by market research, where you're asking people how satisfied they are with that experience. You essentially can develop scripts and things like that are skewed to a particular kind of customer, so you have a real-time marketing execution, and then essentially you do your data extraction. Did it work? Look at the analysis, look at the clusters that are developed from that, and essentially do an ongoing kind of model. So there's a place of essentially activating this entire customer experience, and that's becoming a lot easier to do now, given the kind of availability there is of the cloud, as well as a lot of the analytical tools. Activating strategic market research is another area which is very important, where essentially you look at the overall opportunity index and we essentially take the market size, where you're actually looking at the revenue. You're actually putting in the forecasted revenue as well, purchase history. I mean, there's whole large things which are essentially your enterprise kind of data there. And you look at the receptivity. Here, it's very important to get an idea of, what kind of customer you have, what they're looking for, what their demands are, what are the brand drivers, because essentially the brand is going to be very important in this particular thing when you're trying to figure out exactly who to target, how to target them, and in which way. So also you have to figure out intent to purchase and things like that. So the market research is kind of coming in with the receptivity. How receptive were they going to be? And then you essentially also have the spend, how much they're going to spend, the pricing, you can do the conjoint and things like that. You're looking at wallet share, service importance, increase in budget, and things like that. All those together give you a opportunity index, and again, you're using all the data. So you're looking at the market size, and it's important that you look at the market size, you look at the actual revenue, even if it's a group of people who you're going to be targeting down the line. You need to sort of anticipate how much revenue is going to come from them. So a lot of essentially putting together some of these different types of data in order to really enhance what the opportunity is and make your market assessment. Database scoring, I mean, we've all done a number of segmentation studies, and the thing is, what makes segmentation a lot better is to essentially put some of the respondent data on that segmentation, where you essentially develop a predictive model. You look at how the model is applied to the database, and essentially you sort of do a feedback loop into this particular thing. The customer records are very important. The enterprise level data is very important as well, and the targeted efforts are now really enhanced because you also have some estimate of how much these results are going to be, and you have some way to estimate how strong those results are. Also, when you're activating loyalty and brand performance, I think loyalty, the recommendations, and the satisfaction, which is a typical market research kind of function, but essentially you're also looking at the customer needs, wants, and preferences. So you need to take a look at that and get a feel for what customers really want, and then see how well you're doing. I mean, that the performance gap on estimating how well you're doing on a particular kinds of thing is really kind of important. Making sure that your transactions are run and they run efficiently and people are happy with that particular transaction. How well you're doing in customer service, when your customer service function and your products and services, how well those things are working. So essentially what we're doing is you're putting together a lot of different data sources to get those particular ideas. And it all, in my mind, would be going to what your brand image is and how that is, and your loyalty, the recommendations, the satisfaction, but it's also backed by data, real data, so that you could say, well, if in fact my particular customers are giving me recommendations, or they're very satisfied, or they're very loyal on my particular index, how much is that worth? I mean, because that's the kind of question I always get, is how much is that worth? Well, I think when you start essentially using the data that's even on hand, that becomes, you can come up with an estimate of how much that's worth. You can tell how well you're doing performance-wise and how well you're doing in terms of communication. So with that in mind, I mean, what we're seeing is that companies are processing and storing ever-increasing flows of digital information. And really, this is, I think, the new digital highway that's really out there. However, it's also, these have to be tied to making decisions, and these have to be done in a fairly strict analytical way. The data is there. Essentially, you need to put it together. New pricing models, new ways to engage with customers and partners, operational efficiencies, compliance and risk monitoring, and new market opportunities are all really sort of part of that. And I think the major point is that market research, together with the big data sources, are in fact going to supplement and make the decision making a lot better, and perhaps to a certain degree automate some of that decision making as well. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any particular questions, any comments that you may have, and look forward to hearing from you.